and I wanted to talk about the Fear and Hunger series. This is a new series made in the RPG Maker engine, which you probably know from like 10 years ago. It was really hot. The Fear and Hunger series, it is very, very good. It is very brutal. It's often compared to the manga and limited anime series Berserk, which if you know what that means, you know that I'm saying it's very violent, it's very dark. Expect no quarter emotionally or in terms of kindness in this plot. So Fear and Hunger 1 there's two games and they're very, very different, and I have so much to say. They're both kind of almost, I want to say outsider art, where it's one developer who had an idea and pulled it off, and it's so weird from a normal game-making standpoint, but it also totally makes sense and it's very, very satisfying. But so Fear and Hunger 1 takes place in a medieval setting where you are traversing the dungeons of fear and hunger, and without giving too much away, there are canon endings, there's a lot of endings, but you play either a knight or a mercenary or a dark mage or what is the last one? Or a berserker, like a Viking, an outlander, which is also relevant because the person who made this game this is from Finnish developer Happy Paintings, and the developer is, the publisher is Happy Paintings, developer is Miro Havernen out of Finland, so props to them for that. If you've played an RPG Maker game, a famous one like Yume Nikki or something like that, then you'll be familiar with how this works, or, really any classic RPG. One thing that I think a lot of players would want to warn you about is the coin flip mechanic, so this exists in both games, but it was kind of refined in the second game. It's not nearly as frustrating and horrifying in the second game. In the first game, a lot of things will completely depend on a coin flip, with the idea being that this dungeon, if you're a Berserk fan, if you know that manga and anime, this is all going to make more sense. But the point being that this universe really just chews humans up and spits them out and just completely destroys them. So you're going to get coin flips where if you don't win the coin flip, you are you are injured for the rest of your playthrough, and you're not going to be able to operate at the same level. Or maybe something you really needed, like being able to save after a successful hour of progress. That's not going to happen. So a lot of things like that. Like I said, the coin flips kind of get nerfed and become more reasonable in the second game. We're going to talk about the second game in the back half of this. So before I even get to that, one more thing that you're really going to want to know for any Fear and Hunger game is the dismemberment system. It applies to enemies. It also applies to you. So enemies might target your leg, and if they destroy your leg, then you're not going to be able to move as quickly. You're not going to be able to use that leg for the rest of the game unless you engage some kind of dark magic, which again, this is kind of a Berserk-style universe, so all magic is dark magic. It is both very horrifying and difficult to recover a lost limb, and also quite common. It happens. Now, one thing that, in addition to the Soulsborne style difficulty, incredibly, incredibly difficult, losing is fun, I'll quote from Dwarf Fortress once more, really, really just brutal gameplay. The endings that we're looking at involve one or more of the characters that you'll meet on this quest becoming a new god of fear and hunger, potentially. There's also references. The other thing, so this creator has put in so many references to so many, I've said Berserk a few times, but there are also references to like the King in Yellow, which is a classic horror trope. In Fear and Hunger 2, it gets really out of control. The references to like Majora's Mask, Termina, the moon falling from the sky, Persona, just countless references. I would say Fear and Hunger 1 and 2 are both completely just love letters from this creator to all of their favorite media, which is really, really cool, especially, if you have overlap, if you like this media as well. It's really incredible. But so Fear and Hunger 1, you're trying to infiltrate these terrible, terrible dungeons of Fear and Hunger, which are like famously, it's like the oubliette. You go there, you don't come back, and you are either a knight trying to save a character who, spoiler alert, is very much like, if you know Griffith from Berserk, very, very similar to like a Casca style. She's going after Griffith after things have gone bad in the torture dungeon, and then straight from that torture dungeon, you go into a hellscape. Again, very reminiscent of these kind of things, from which there is no escape and no joy, but you can forge new gods to unholy entities. Oh, so, I was actually reading about this, and I'm going to credit the wiki article for Fear and Hunger, because a lot of these references that I was picking up on were slipping my mind. But so just for the record, Fear and Hunger also draws from Silent Hill strongly. Like there's Pyramid Head motifs. Amnesia, The Dark Descent is like very obvious. It's roguelike as well, so there's any kind of like any roguelike references all the way back to NetHack. But so Fear and Hunger 2, a lot of people will say you should start with Fear and Hunger 2 because a lot of the most brutal and frustrating mechanics were kind of refined in Fear and Hunger 2, and it's really beautiful. It's almost like a Final Fantasy. Like, you start, and so you choose to be 8 out of 12 or 14 characters, and each character is very, very interesting, but you've all been stopped on a train in war-torn alternate reality Europe. So like picture like World War II Europe, but in an alternate reality, and it's also Silent Hill. So this train has stopped, and every character has their own secrets, and every character has their own weird stuff going on, and this train has stopped, and you're now trapped in this creepy town full of monsters and mutated things, and this god of madness, which again, it's like a love letter. It's like an homage to The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, where in 3 days the moon is going to crash into the earth. The moon is this omnipotent thing that's been sent down to destroy everything, and you have 3 days for a festival. But in this case, it's even darker than the source material that it pays homage to, because the premise is that you and these 14 other chosen ones are going to do a battle royale, whatever you prefer, a Fortnite, a battle royale, Hunger Games, a battle royale or a Fortnite or a Hunger Games between you and all these other passengers who are just trying to survive, get on this train through war-torn Europe. And there's also there's even a reference to, there's a clown called Needles, who I'm going to show footage of. And the whole point is that Needles is basically just the Terrifier from the new horror movies, which I wouldn't recommend. Those are very scary. That's too brutal for me. Again, trigger warning of all kinds for these games. But so Needles the clown is kind of an homage to the Terrifier, and he will come and just kind of like torture contestants to speed along. The point being that these 14 contestants, only one may survive, but not really a spoiler. You can figure out your way to outsmart that if you study this game and check out every possible iteration of what can happen. So the main mechanic to talk about in Fear and Hunger 2 is the 3-day system. Now, it's not like you might think, because it takes place in Termina and there's a moon that's bearing down to destroy everyone, and it has 3 days before the end of the world, you might think that this is obviously just like Majora's Mask, but in fact, the 3-day system is different here. 3-day system in Fear and Hunger 2 Termina is, so parts of the RPG map will unlock over the course of these 3 days. You don't get to replay time. You don't get to go back except to start a new character. So you have to do it perfectly. It's truly roguelike in that way. It's roguelite because you can still save, but you are navigating these 3 days perfectly to survive this scenario where a dark god and 13 odd other contestants, and also a whole town full of horrible torture monsters are specifically conspiring to not see you succeed. And, the storylines are really, really beautiful. Each character... So this is something that's very interesting. So Fear and Hunger 1 takes place in the same universe as Fear and Hunger 2, but it takes place like 500 or maybe 800 years later, something like that. It's the difference between medieval time for us and World War II era for us today. So we do actually know the canon endings of Fear and Hunger 1, even though there's all these different endings. So like in Fear and Hunger 1, you're either there to save or to destroy this Griffith-like character who's been taken into these dungeons. But that ends up going out of control. And like I said, all these new gods are forged. And I won't spoil that. But Fear and Hunger 2 takes place in that universe where certain endings have already occurred. Now, there is no Fear and Hunger 3, which means that we don't know the canon endings for Fear and Hunger 2. But there are some very compelling storylines that, again, I won't spoil, but are so dark and brutal and compelling that I feel confident that we can expect some of these endings to be canon. But that's the thing. There's so many endings. You can be not any one of these 14 characters yet. The game, I think, they're still maybe adding characters that you can play as and, lead to success. But I think you can be like most of the, like at least 8 or 10 of the 14 characters currently. Some characters you can tell are suckers. In this video, for example, the salaryman is a very common early prey for most endings, where he kind of doesn't take the situation seriously and then he wanders off and you can get him pretty easily. I do think that's all I wanted to say about the Fear and Hunger series. I checked these games out. I'm really impressed. Again, this is the third warning of the video. There is a lot of nudity. There's a lot of, how do you say it in YouTube? Self-unappreciation in this game. There's a lot of brutal things that happen. So, fair warning, you're going to hit, I think it's even delisted from Steam technically just because there's so much nudity. For example, as soon as you boot Fear and Hunger, you're going to notice that the prison guards are packing in a way which is actually even strategically impossible to ignore, because if you ignore what the game refers to as a stinger, you will quickly lose and suffer a bad ending. But so this is definitely adult content. Imagine like back in the day when you were reading a review for like Duke Nukem 3D for Windows 95. This is definitely not for kids, but it's very cool. I'm really happy to see that people are still making really interesting things in RPG Maker and things like that. So I really wanted to make a video on that, and yeah, keep the channel warm. Don't worry, still playing Dwarf Fortress, and I will check in with that the next time something interesting happens. Thank you for listening.